Hello, welcome back to Math Time with Professor Prime, and I'm your host as always, Professor Prime. Today we're going to talk about math in Star Wars Knights of the Old Republic 2, an underrated sequel to an amazing game, and an awesome game in its own right. Here's how the video is going to go. We're going to talk about how math is used in Knights of the Old Republic 2 while explaining the gameplay and then branching out along the way into other areas of the game that's impacted by math. And we'll also be talking about my experience with the game. And I might talk about some elements of the story, so spoilers ahead. If you don't want to know anything about the story, like if you want to go and just completely unaware, if you've played the game, you're good. If you want to play the game but you don't care about spoilers, you're good. If you don't have any intentions of playing the game and you don't care about spoilers, you're good. But I mentioned that in these sort of videos, I mentioned spoilers in these sort of videos just to be safe. So with that in mind, spoilers ahead. And if you don't want to watch it because you want to avoid the spoilers, that's okay. I get that. But if you don't mind the spoilers or you already know what goes on in the story, again, you're good to go. So let's get into it. So in Knights of the Old Republic 2, it, like its predecessor, Knights of the Old Republic, has a lot of math on the surface and a lot of math bubbling underneath, behind the scenes. And so that's pretty cool to me. And like I said, I want to focus in on the gameplay to kind of get started, but I want to branch out into other areas like, in the game itself and also in like making the game. And talk a little bit about its development because it's pretty interesting. I mean, it was developed in around a year, and so we're gonna get into that a little bit more as we go on. So yeah. So with Knights of the Old Republic 2, it is an RPG through and through, um, like its predecessor. So as far as the gameplay is concerned, well, you go and you explore different planets while you're unlocking the story and fighting your opponents. And right off the bat, when you start the game, you're given two big choices. You're able to create a character. Now you're able to custom create that character or do a quick create. And the difference being with the custom creation, you get to choose which points go where. Already some math. But if you do the quick select option, you don't get that choice to start. Personally, I'd recommend the custom character creation. So what do the points do? Well, the idea is you're divvying out points to your attributes and also like your kind of focus and your skills. So with those attributes, it's your stats, right? Like, and they measure different things. You deal with things like strength, dexterity, intelligence, charisma, wisdom, things along those lines. So you get to determine how strong your character will be, how skilled they'll be in defense and evasion. How many skills they actually get when you're leveling up, which is dictated by the intelligence, with strength and dexterity determining the other ones that I mentioned. And then something like wisdom affecting your force powers, and something like charisma affecting how you interact with people as you go forward in the galaxy. And then you have different skills like security and computer use, stealth, and each of the skills and the attributes are kept track of mathematically. Different characters have different skills at the beginning as a baseline, and for your particular character, you do get to again like choose if you want to distribute the points in the beginning. So there's already a lot of math just at the start of the game. And here's the thing. In addition to like what I just mentioned, you can choose a class at the beginning of the game, right? You can choose to be a Jedi Guardian, a Jedi Counselor, or a Jedi Sentinel. With the Jedi Guardian being more proficient in combat and lightsaber skills, and with the Jedi Counselor being more skilled with the Force powers, and with the Jedi Sentinel being somewhat of a mix, right? A more balanced um, distribution of each. Sorry, I heard some like cars in the background, but and so but hopefully things will be clear and or clear enough. I feel like they were, but I'll look into that if they weren't. But the idea is you choose these classes and they impact the gameplay like later on, and then once you reach level 15, things change. But before we get into that, the idea is like you choose everything, and as you go forward, as you fight opponents, as you go on missions, you build up experience. That experience is kept up numerically, right? I mean, sorry, it's kept track of numerically, and with that in mind, you gain enough experience points, you level up, and you get your stats increase, and you can attribute your points how you want to. And I think, unlike the first one, there's not that level cap at 20. It goes a bit higher than that. So, with that in mind, again, there's a lot of math right off the bat, right? And so you have your attributes that will be like, dictate how you do combat, but those attributes also affect the skills that you have. And as you go on and you accrue comrades, they have different attributes and skills, or sorry, rather, they have different attribution and skill levels than your character at the start. And they build and they grow as you do. And you can influence those characters to the light side or the dark side. Um, and I want to get into that in a second, but I wanted to go back to what happens at level 15. So at level 15, if you have sufficient dark side and light side alignment, or it's a roof, if you're on the dark side or the light side sufficiently so, then you can unlock a prestige class where it's like taking those three classes before, but then like kind of upping them, and that affects your powers and how you deal with people. But see, here's the thing: while they do have these prestige classes kind of matching up with those initial classes, you don't have to like be in the same sort of territory, if that makes sense. So basically, if you have something like a Jedi Guardian, right? You don't necessarily have to be a Jedi Weapons Master or a Sith Marauder. You can do the other prestige classes. Like, it depends on what you want to do. And I'm trying to remember them. So you have Jedi Weapons Master, Jedi Watchman, and Jedi Master. And then for the Sith, yeah, Sith Marauder, Sith Assassin, Sith Lord. In my playthroughs, I tend to like start off as the Jedi Guardian class and move over to the Sith Lord. So it's like, hey, that's my combo: Jedi Guardian, Sith Lord. And if you're wondering, when it comes to KOTOR and KOTOR 2, while I have done light side runs, I primarily play on the dark side, which is kind of counterintuitive because that's not how I would do things in real life. However, it's fun. It's really fun to play on the dark side in both of those games. And I would argue that in both of the games, it actually makes more sense on a narrative level to be on the dark side. Because I feel like with the light side, you get into this idea of redemption from, both of the characters from those respective games, like 1 and 2. And it's just like, it's not convincing. Because, like, and again, like I said, spoilers ahead, and I think it's also fair to say for KOTOR um, too. So just keep that in mind going forward. So again, like the two characters, like Revan in the first one and the Exile in the second one, It's like they both do horrific things like within their backstories, and it's like it doesn't make sense that they come to the light. And the Jedi of this era are pretty awful. Just saying. but back to the math. So I mentioned the light side and the dark side, and what's cool about that is, so as you go through the game, right? You're making different decisions, you're exploring, and as you're making decisions and you're taking different actions, it affects your dark side and your light side alignment. So here's the thing. You see a visual representation of that alignment next to your character and which way you're moving. And there's math in that. But, that's on the surface alone. Behind the scenes, it's what you might traditionally think of when you think of math. Because, like, the visual representation, that's a huge part of it, right? That's math. But to give you something to grab onto, uh, there's a range 0 to 100. This is true of KOTOR. This is true of KOTOR 2. With KOTOR 2 getting a little bit more complicated as you progress. But the idea is that there's a range 0 to 100, and you move between that range is you're playing a game, is you're taking action, is you're making decisions. Um, and here's how it goes. Like when you start the game, you're at 50 for your alignment points, right? So you're neutral. But when you slide into 75 to 100, and in that like upper quarter, you're on the light side, like firmly. When you're at that 0 to 25 range, that lower quarter, you are like very much firmly on the dark side. And here's the thing: is you play through the game, that alignment can change based on your decisions because like each action you take has a certain amount of points associated with them in terms of light side or dark side. Like you get to think of it this way: there's like high dark, mid dark, low dark, highlight, mid dark. Oh, sorry, highlight, low light, and mid light. I said that in the order I didn't want to. Highlight, mid light, low light. And each of those like 6 stages that I mentioned come with a certain amount of points, right? So like if I was taking that action and I were doing high dark, for instance, it's going to be different than an action that's only like sort of dark. And I know the ones for like Knights of the Old Republic, and I think for Knights of the Old Republic 2, at least on that base level, it's the same, but you get more complicated stuff based on your class. But like, let's just give an example though. So for high dark, I might get -6 points on my alignment scale. For mid dark, -4. For low dark, -2. And on the other side, +2 for low light, +4 for mid light, +6 for highlight. And the idea is like each action can go back and forth and changing your alignment. So it's possible for you to be like neutral throughout most of the game, like being pretty gray because you gotta figure like if 0 to 25 is dark and 75 to 100 is light, most of that middle category is neutral. So you got like a half of the scale being neutral, that half that range. So that's interesting to me. And which class, or rather, which prestige class in this case, you choose, like it affects certain things, right? And like your alignment in general affects certain things. Like there's gonna be certain items that you can't wear or that you can wear, and that's gonna affect the buffs that you get. So there's a lot of math going on. Like I said, on the surface, sure, but also behind the scenes. And the combat itself is based off a D20 system, which was based off of D&D, and made for D&D, like a while back. And the reason why that is because that's what the first one was based off of. So you get like this idea of a certain amount of chance being done here, and the idea is like behind the scenes the like dice or the die is kind of being cast and based on whatever values are going on behind the scene, it affects what kind of modifiers to your attack, defense, and etc. are going to be. There might have been a better way to say that. But the idea is there's a lot of math going on, like just the combat, your journey in the force. Um, there's math and how the story unfolds. Like there's math in the music. There's math in the resource management because throughout the game you can build up money, you can buy items, and you have to manage that, right? Um, because each item has a cost and it might do certain things for you, but you have to like keep track of the items that you have and the amount of money you have. So there's math on the money, there's math on the items, there's math on like maintaining those items and using them in battle as well. And you do get different lightsaber crystals along the way. Some of those crystals like impact your color, which is cool, and some of them give you certain buffs to your stats, to your attributes. So that is something to consider. There's a lot of math going on. Like it is fundamentally bonkers. And for the record, I am going to leave a lot of links in the description. So if you get curious, you can do a deep dive because oof, I already knew there was a lot of math in KOTOR 2. But for this sort of video, just like with my other videos, I like to do my digging. I like to see what else I can find. And what I found was a staggering amount of math, even considering what I knew. And it's like this balancing act. And so there's like math all over the place in that game. There's math in making that game and programming that game, right? And coding it up and developing the different worlds and how things might unfold in the story, right? It's very calculated. And here's the thing, like I mentioned earlier on in the video, this game was pretty much made in a year. So basically, this is how it went down. Back in July of 2003, Knights of the Old Republic came out. And around that time, the first draft of KOTOR 2 was already made, but like apparently the developers were not able to play that, they weren't able to play KOTOR originally, so the first draft had to be largely revised to take in KOTOR 1 into account. They also made sure that they watched the Star Wars movies, read the books and the comic books at that time. This back then was called the Extended Universe, which some of you may know a thing about. If you're getting into Star Wars in modern times, you might know this is Legends material, like for the comic books and the books, things like that. And they use that in KOTOR 1, like I said, is a base. So like a lot of time, energy, and effort went into this. And again, and I can't stress this enough, it was not a long development time. So basically, they did their rewrites and all that. And by the time of like October that year of 2003, they started to like put that game into development. And then in December of 2004, it came out. So just a little over a year, like 14 months after developing the game, after starting like developing the game, like it came out. And when you put that in like context with the first game, it was only 17 months, right? So you had KOTOR and then KOTOR 2, 17 months apart, which is insane. And here's the thing. They actually developed a lot of content that got left out, and there was enough framework for more. And for the record, I played this game multiple times. It felt like a complete experience to me. There were some parts in the end where they could have gone into more detail, but the thing about it is though, like again, I felt it was pretty complete when I played it. So it's so interesting to know that there was so much cut content. And over the years, there's been like a lot of people in the fan modding community and the modding community that like have made mods that take in that cut content into account. So that's like pretty cool. And they weren't doing that for pay, and they put a lot of time in it. And there's math in that. But yeah, so there's a lot of math that's going on in KOTOR 2, and it's just again, it's fundamentally bonkers to me. And so if I wanted to, if I'm going to switch gears, I'm going to talk about my experience with the game, and some of those characters in the world. And like I've been saying, spoilers ahead. And again, for KOTOR and KOTOR 1, really. So in the first game, you play as a character who's lost their memory, and you find out, you're Revan. That's the big twist, right? Um, and then in the second one, you don't get that same level of twist. Uh, what you get is you played as Revan's general, the exile, which that background is less exciting, at least on paper. Because you find out later on in the game that um, your character does some pretty horrific acts back on Malachor 5 back in the day. And, Malachor 5, some math in that. But more seriously, though, mass murder to end the war. It's pretty horrific. And that's what your character does. And like I said, you know, it's just at face value, you don't know that. Or you just know, oh, this guy was, or girl was Revan's general. And that's not exciting. But that twist, that is a bit. And so to me, when you're killing like thousands of people, you kind of can't be redeemed. And here, it was so quick. And I did I think it sets up an interesting through line in the game is that like that event was so horrible that like the general, the exile, severed their ties without realizing it to the Force. And I find that interesting because throughout the game, you know, you interact with a character called Kreia. And again, like it's one of those things where if you already played it, you know. But the refresher is that you know Kreia is a bit in the gray area in the game, and I enjoyed like watching you know, or playing through the game, and because I was gonna say watching interactions, but I don't. I don't know if that's the best way to say it. Like playing the game and like interacting with the characters, like that was fun for me. Like the gameplay was really fun, and I think the idea that like Kreia touches on, especially in the end, is that your character, the exile, is or has the potential to be a wound in the Force, or you know, so like being that wound or having that potential to be that wound in the Force was an interesting idea to me, and I like the idea that Kreia proposes about the Force because like you know we have so many ideas they based on what we see, but for her, light side, dark side, it doesn't matter. The Force manipulates people, and I found that like fascinating. She like kind of wanted to destroy the Force, and I think when you have characters like that, she was like tremendously fascinating because she's someone who you're working with throughout like the game, and she just sometimes she annoyed me, but she had some interesting ideas, and like there was a trio of like Sith Lords in this game, because you know she is one ultimately, but she works with like you know she's Darth Treya, which I was never crazy about that name, but she's Darth Treya, right? And she works with Darth Scion and Darth Nihilus, and with Scion, Darth Nihilus, they themselves are not interesting characters that have a lot of depth to me. However, their backstories do give you some idea of why they are the way they are, and more than that, they're unique to me because with Darth Scion, he dies, and his hatred brings him back to life. But you know, he still has the same wounds that he got from before, and he still has the same pain, and that was fascinating to me. And with Darth Nihilus consumed people, right? Like he consumed the Force from people. He killed people. He killed worlds. Like he was pretty much like a small scale Galactus in a sense. Like he had this ever going hunger, and you know, it's meanwhile it's like chipping away at his body. So I found like the villains to be interesting either because they were like Kreia, where she's just interesting philosophically speaking, or they were like Nihilus or Scion, where there's something there that's interesting. And then the characters that you are on a journey with, they're fascinating, and you can influence them to the light side or the dark side as you progress. Overall, I enjoyed Knights of the Old Republic. It's one of those things where it was on my list, and I got it for Christmas one year. And I played it, and I enjoyed it. I thought it was like a pretty good follow up, and I think it's worth noting that it was made by like Obsidian, rather than BioWare, because BioWare was making a lot of other RPGs at that time, and honestly, like with the timeline of the game, it was pretty aggressive. But I do think it's worth noting that Obsidian did pull off an awesome game. It's an underrated, an underrated sequel, and yeah, an underrated classic. Not on that same like par in terms of being a classic as KOTOR, but not far from it. And it needs to be talked about. So I was glad that I got to talk about this. I enjoyed the game overall. I like the story, and I like the additions to the power and like the gameplay. It was more intricate. It took what worked from Knights of the Old Republic and it expanded that gameplay wise. I do think it was more interesting playing as Revan in that first game rather than the Exile, because the Exile was just a general of Revan, but the Exile does go on to have an interesting story, so it's all good. And again, like some of the powers, like they're pretty crazy. I remember like Force Crush, it's just like crushing people inward. It's like it's insane. But yeah, there's a lot of math in this game. Like there's math in the combat, math in the force power, math in like the attributes, math that went into making the game, math that comes into play as you as the player, because you're playing for a certain number of hours, you're getting a certain amount of bang for your buck. So there's a lot of math in that. There's a lot of math in the decision makings and like the resource management that you're going to be doing. So K.O.T.O.R II, again, it's a game that I enjoyed. It's a game that is underrated. It's a game that's a really solid sequel to an absolutely amazing game. And again, it's awesome in its own right. If you've played it, please feel free to discuss it. If you haven't and you want to, you should. Even though I already talked about some of the spoilers, but like I said in the beginning, if you don't care about that, you're good. So yeah, I had fun making this video. It took a while, but yeah. So I will see you in the next one. Please make sure to like check the description for links if you get curious about some of the topics that I talked about in this video. Either way, I'll see ya in the future. Professor Prime out.